In tonight's news edition, Prince Faisal meets with a group from the American Jewish organization J Street and reiterates Jordan's support of peace negotiations based on a two-state solution and the Arab Peace Initiative. In Libya, military forces of the self-declared Libyan National Army attack the country's parliament, force lawmakers to flee and set the building on fire. And some 40 people are killed in Serbia and Bosnia as the Balkans are hit by the worst flooding in more than a century, which has devastated the agricultural sector. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. His Royal Highness Prince Faisal met with a group from the American Jewish organization J Street. The organization is a liberal U.S.-based advocacy group that backs a two-state solution to end the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and rejects the Israeli settlement policies. He reiterated Jordan's support of peace negotiations based on a two-state solution and the Arab Peace Initiative, leading to the establishment of an independent, viable Palestinian state. Prince Faisal lauded J Street's support to Mideast peace as a means to reinforce security and stability in the region. The meeting also touched on the Syria crisis and the challenges facing Jordan as host of the largest number of Syrian refugees. Separately, His Royal Highness Prince Faisal the Regent received a delegation representing Caritas Foundation International, currently convening a regional conference in Amman. Prince Faisal briefed the delegation on Jordan's efforts in partnership with international agencies to confront regional challenges, especially those facing Syria's neighboring countries as a result of the prolonged crisis. His Royal Highness voiced appreciation of Caritas' humanitarian work through its Jordan branch, as well as its efforts in the area of local development and social service. The delegation said they fully understood the load on Jordan's resources as it continues to receive a growing number of Syrian refugees, and praised His Majesty the King's efforts to promote Mideast peace as well as interfaith and intercultural harmony. Over to the Syria crisis. The head of Syria's air defense was killed in fighting east of Damascus. An Islamist rebel coalition and a monitoring group said General Hussein Ishaq died of wounds suffered during a military offensive by President Bashar al-Assad's forces against rebels in Mleha suburb, where the Air Defense Administration has a large base. General Ishaq died of wounds inflicted yesterday when rebels confronted an attempt to storm Mleha, according to the rebel group. The suburb close to the road linking central Damascus to the international airport has seen heavy fighting in recent days. State media made no mention of Ishaq's reported death, but internet sites also said he was killed in Mleha. An Egyptian court jailed more than 160 Muslim Brotherhood supporters to up to 15 years in prison. The court handed down 10-year jail terms to 126 Brotherhood supporters accused of violence and membership of a terrorist group in one of the cases. A further 37 people received 15-year sentences in a second case related to an alleged attempt to blow up a Cairo metro station. The government declared the Brotherhood a terrorist group after an upsurge in attacks on the police and army, in which many of the attacks have been claimed by radical Islamist groups such as Ansar Bayt al-Maqdis. Meanwhile, a bomb in Cairo wounded at least 3 people at an election event in support of Egyptian President, frontrunner and former army chief Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. One of the injured was a policeman. In the Libyan capital Tripoli, military forces of the self-declared Libyan National Army, led by retired General Khalifa Haftar, attacked the country's parliament, forcing lawmakers to flee. A lawmaker said the parliament building was set on fire. Heavy gunfire from anti-aircraft weapons and rocket-propelled grenades could be heard for kilometers away. A security official said the attackers also shelled a nearby military base controlled by an Islamist militia. Haftar is carrying out an offensive against Islamist militias in Benghazi and says the central government and parliament have no mandate, vowing to press on with his operation. As part of last week's mine disaster in Turkey, police detained 18 people, including mining company executives and personnel. The rescue operation at the coal mine in the western town of Soma ended yesterday after the bodies of the last 2 workers were carried out, bringing the death toll to 301. The disaster occurred on Tuesday when a fire sent deadly carbon monoxide coursing through the mine, triggering protests across Turkey aimed at mine owners and at Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan's government. A police official said local prosecutors are questioning the company employees at a Soma courthouse. Police put the town of Soma on virtual lockdown, setting up checkpoints and detaining dozens of people to enforce a ban on protests. Security in the town remained tight today. Rescue efforts are underway as the Balkans have been hit by the worst flooding in more than a century. At least 40 people have been killed in Serbia and Bosnia, while tens of thousands remain without electricity. The United States, Russia, and Europe joined the relief efforts. The floods are expected to devastate the agricultural sectors vital to the region's economy. This report has more.
The United States, Israel, Turkey, Slovenia, Austria, Luxembourg and Croatia have offered aid to Balkan states suffering their worst floods in 120 years. Croatia has some flooding itself in the east, but the town of Obrenovac in Serbia is the hardest hit. It's likely the town's entire population of 25,000 will be evacuated. Bosnia is also appealing for international help to handle the floods. Here too, tens of thousands face the prospect of evacuation. By Sunday, at least 20 people were known to have died, nearly all in Bosnia.
It's simple.
In eastern Croatia, about 1,000 troops have been deployed to help with relief efforts in flooded areas. Forecasters were warning of surges of high water expected to reach the Sava and Danube rivers over the weekend, threatening thousands more properties and roads. What's being described as 3 months of rainfall in just 3 days also threatens further dangers. It's a mountainous region and many hillsides have become unstable. On top of that, Bosnia's Centre for the Removal of Landmines is warning that mines laid during the 1992-95 war could be moved around by floods and landslides.
Also, Pope Francis expressed his personal closeness to the victims of the heavy flooding during his Sunday prayers in St. Peter's Square.
Severe floods have devastated large areas of the Balkans, above all in Serbia and Bosnia. While I entrust to the Lord the victims of such disasters, I express my personal closeness to those living through hours of anguish and tribulation. Let us pray together for these brothers and sisters.
Tatars in Crimea are commemorating the 70th anniversary since their deportation by Soviet leader Joseph Stalin. Ukraine's acting president Alexander Turchanov and Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk laid flowers at a memorial to the victims of political repression. This year, the ceremonies marking the anniversary are being eclipsed by the continued crisis in Ukraine, where the usual march in Simferopol was banned amid fears of clashes. Tatars, who make up to 12% of Crimea's population, widely ignored the referendum organized on the peninsula that led to its annexation by Russia, and many are still figuring out how to coexist with the new leadership. As the fate of over 200 Nigerian schoolgirls remains unknown after over a month of being abducted by the group Boko Haram, worshippers in Nigeria took time to pray for the safe return of the young girls. Yesterday, Nigeria's President Goodluck Jonathan was in France for a summit with leaders from West African countries as well as Europe and the United States, where they agreed to work together to wage a total war on Boko Haram by sharing intelligence, coordinating actions, and monitoring borders. The militant group Boko Haram have been fighting for 5 years, bombing and attacking civilian and security forces, but it took the kidnapping of schoolgirls for the attention of the world to finally focus on them.
I think Christians and Muslims alike are not being spared. And so I see it more from the perspective of terrorism. And we're living in a culture of death. And it's not only Boko Haram, kidnappers are everywhere, armed robbers are everywhere. And I see this as an and I see this as a menace that really needs to be handled from a spiritual and a physical angle.
At the Cannes Film Festival, Hollywood star Salma Hayek defended her decision to stage a mini protest on the red carpet, calling for the release of the Nigerian schoolgirls. Hayek broke with festival protocol yesterday by holding up a sign calling for the release of the 200 schoolgirls being kept hostage in Nigeria. She's the latest star to lend her name to a social media campaign appealing to their captors to set them free. Protests aren't allowed on the Cannes red carpet, but Salma Hayek says she decided to risk it to promote the cause.
Well, you know, I've always been involved with the cause of fighting for women's rights, and I took the opportunity because there were going to be so many photographers to put some pressure and remind them that we want these girls back. They have to do something about it, and that even though there is a film festival, and even though I'm so honored to be here and excited about my film, we don't forget about it for a minute.
Qasr al-Mushatta, or the Winter Palace, is the ruin of an Umayyad palace 30 kilometers south of Amman. It is part of a string of castles, palaces, and caravans known as the Desert Castles. In an effort by the Archaeology Department in cooperation with the German government, the first phase of restoration of al-Mushatta has been completed. Restoration work continued over 4 years with assistance from a number of German institutions. Today, a celebration marking the opening of the palace to the public took place on site under the patronage of His Royal Highness Prince Hassan and Princess Sumaya bint al-Hassan. His Royal Highness took the opportunity of unveiling the historic site to speak of the history of Jordan as the meeting place of civilization and culture and religions.
I speak to you all in the context of the Holy Land in which we share. Outre Jourdain, Trans-Jordan, Abr al-Urdun, as we prepare to receive His Holiness the Pope, meeting as he will be in Jerusalem with Patriarch Bartholomew, the Chrysostom of Ephes, Western Christianity and Eastern Christianity, if you will, bridging divides. I wonder whether it will be possible to speak of cultural reconciliation. I wonder whether it will be possible or even desirable for politicians to remember heritage. I wonder whether Arab Christians who today identify Al-Khidr with the figure of St. George. Muslim commentary occasionally states that in accordance with his name, the earth became green wherever he walked or prayed. I wonder whether we can green this earth again.
The future is here. A man soared inside Washington, D.C.'s Ronald Reagan building with the help of a hydrogen and nitrogen-powered jetpack. The event was sponsored by the Smithsonian Magazine, which is part of a 3-day festival celebrating the future. The jetpack flight is powered by a pressurized blast of non-flammable hydrogen peroxide and nitrogen that produces high-temperature and high-pressure steam. However, there was no word on what the price tag on something like that might be. Mexico City set a new Guinness World Record for the largest number of chefs gathered in one place at one time. The original record was set in 2013 in Dubai, with 2,847 chefs gathered in one place, but Mexico City nabbed the title with 3,634 chefs. Before setting the records, waiters took part in a race to demonstrate their dedication to serving their clients. Mexico City has more than 8,000 food and beverage businesses that generated hundreds of thousands of jobs. MotoGP world champion Marc Marquez won the French Grand Prix to maintain his 100% record in 2014 and become the youngest rider to win 5 races in a row in the top class of motorcycling. The Spaniard started on pole position for the 5th time in 5 races this season, but had to fight back from 10th place at the end of the first lap after a poor getaway. He reeled in Italian Valentino Rossi, who finished 2nd on a Yamaha, while Spaniard Alvaro Bautista came in 3rd. Marquez now has a maximum 125 points with Honda teammate Dani Pedrosa, who finished 5th on 83 and Rossi on 81. Australia's Brad DeLosa became one of the world's best woodsmen when he picked up Stihl Timber Sports Champions Trophy in Hungary. A straight knockout between the world's top 8, the Champions Trophy comprises a chainsaw discipline, the stalk saw, followed by an underhand chop with an axe. Next comes the single buck using a cross-cut saw around 2 meters long before competitors took on the standing block chop. DeLosa eased through his quarterfinals and semifinals before meeting New Zealand's Jason Wynnard in the final. Although it was a hard-fought affair, DeLosa proved himself with a proud victory. And finally, relatively cool weather with cloudy skies and northwesterly moderate winds continues tonight in most regions. Tomorrow, another rise in temperatures is expected, creating relatively hot conditions across the country, with northwesterly winds stirring dust, especially in the Badia regions. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect a fair night and hot day tomorrow, with northerly brisk winds and slightly choppy seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. To end the news, here's a reminder of our top stories. Prince Faisal meets with a group from the American Jewish organization J Street and reiterates Jordan's support of peace negotiations based on a two-state solution and the Arab Peace Initiative. In Libya, military forces of the self-declared Libyan National Army attacked the country's parliament, forced lawmakers to flee, and set the building on fire. And some 40 people are killed in Serbia and Bosnia as the Balkans are hit by the worst flooding in more than a century, which has devastated the agricultural sector. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Nancy Khair. Thank you for watching and have a good night.